Well, hello. This week we are in our Bible study on Thursday, and we're looking at Isaiah chapter 9 this week on Zoom on Thursday. Last time we looked at Isaiah chapter 7, and we kind of looked at the difficulties that were happening. We saw the sign of Emmanuel, but we also saw that the king of Assyria was coming. And here we find ourselves in chapter 9, and we find ourselves with some very familiar verses. Well, verses 2 to 7 are ones that we perhaps associate with the Advent period. But let's look a bit at what this actually means for us. In verse 1, we're told that there was a contempt in the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. That these are lands of a northern kingdom. And here we're told these very, very familiar words of those of us who perhaps are familiar with church. The people who walked in a darkness have seen a great light. So it speaks of this time of enlightenment. In the beginning of verse 1, it says there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. And it goes on to speak about this kind of light, that the light that has multiplied the nation, it's increased joy, and that there'll be rejoicing. There'll be joy at the harvest. Remember, the harvest was something that was significant for them. It was life or death. Think about the stock market. It's almost like that nowadays. And then they talk about the rod of the oppressor has been broken, like it happened in the past in Midian. And then it goes on to describe what kind of light it's going to be. And we're told that this light will be a child is born, a son is given. Again, verses that we remember at Christmas time. And we find a description of this person. People here and nowadays give their children all sorts of names. And perhaps in more modern times, these names are quite weird and wonderful. But here we're told that the name of this child is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And we also know that in biblical times, names had a real meaning to them. It also tells us about this kingdom belonging to this son. We're told that the government and the peace, there will be no end of it, and that it will be based on the throne of David to establish and uphold it. And the zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. So I want us to think about justice. I want us to think about the nature of this coming child. And obviously, as we look at the Old Testament, we'll look to see where do we find Jesus in it. So I want us to think about the nature of this child. I want us to think about how it is framed, about the people walking in darkness, about the situation that was before the child, and about the justice that flows from it. And also, if we do have time, I want us to also look at verses 8 to 21. Now, those are the verses that we don't tend to look at so much in chapter 9. This chapter is quite unusual because we don't have all the chronologies in it, and we don't have the big long names that sometimes put us off. But in verses 8 to 21, we do find some of that. We find the idea of judgment. Yes, we're told that good things are going to happen. There's going to be this new kingdom that's going to be established on the throne of David. But also we're told about Ephraim and Samaria and how their kingdoms will come to an end. It mentions other places too. The Lord does not rejoice over the young men. Everyone is godless and an evildoer. It's a big contrast from what has happened before, this righteousness is going to occur. But we also learn that we need to have this period of cleansing. It describes and explains why this child is being born almost. It says in verse 12, the Syrians on the east and the Philistines on the west devour Israel with open mouths. It says the bricks have fallen, but we will build with dressed stones. The bricks have fallen. Perhaps brick is not a material that's particularly solid. Yes, it is solid, and we have standardised bricks now. But dressed stones, obviously stone is much more solid, But dress stones are fancy stones, stone you put on the outside of your house, on the frontage. It describes the quality of what will happen next. The cedars will be cut down, but the sycamores, the sycamores have been cut down, but the cedars will replace them. But so we find this idea of there's going to be a justice, and this is why there's a justice happening, because of all these injustices. At the end, we find in verses 20 and 21, we find each devours the flesh of their own arm. Manasseh devours Ephraim, Ephraim devours Manasseh. These are the sons of Joseph. Families are eating up each other, sometimes quite literally, in terms of taking each other's lands, but also emotionally too. People are in a bad state of play when it comes to being at peace with their families. They devour, but they're not satisfied. Each devours the flesh of their own arm. So basically we have this prophecy, and then we have the reason why this child is being born here, which we look to in Jesus. And we find that there is all these injustices that are going to be put together. It's a complete contrast to somebody who's coming, who is the Prince of Peace. So I want us to think about some of these themes and anything else you can think of on Thursday. I look forward to seeing you then.